we have the privilege now to commemorate day by day the gems that were bequeathed a century ago, to, as it were, walk in his footsteps, leading up to the steps that led him to India and then to his soaring flight in the world beyond. But today we commemorate the gem that he offered at the Sorbonne. I wonder if the universities today would be as open to a mystical discourse of this kind. It's a wonderful thought that 100 years ago, a Sufi teacher of India could be received in the Sorbonne to give a lecture which alludes to the positivism, the philosophy of rationalist materialism, which already 100 years ago was very much in ascendancy, but a lecture in which the mystic would prioritize over positivism another epistemology, that knowing which comes from the deep mystery at the center of being. That's something that academia hasn't yet come to terms with, and maybe one day it will. One of our friends here mentioned Carl Jung, who certainly made an effort within the field of the rational sciences, within psychology, to account for what is beyond the rational, what is beyond the syllogistic. And that's what Murshid is describing here. And he begins by speaking of the human being as a vast phenomenon. This is an important reminder to all of us. It really is the role of the Murshid to expand our horizons, to help us to recall contours fuller, deeper, wider than we could have recognized within ourselves. We are somewhat like goldfish. And as you know, if a goldfish is kept in a small bowl, the goldfish stays small. And if the goldfish is allowed to swim freely in a capacious pond amongst water lilies, it grows large. So we grow as large as our own vision can accommodate. And if we remain circumscribed within a narrow vision, we stay small. But we are as vast as our vision of life becomes. And so a conversation like this, the teaching that Murshid has given and our conversation now, is all about stretching the boundaries, reacclimating ourselves to far wider horizons. We've become unnecessarily narrowed down. Murshid goes on to say that wisdom is not a particular piece of knowledge. It's the sum of all knowledge, but not in the sense of a heap or a collection of facts. Rather, he describes it as the essence of all that is collected, in the same way that honey is manufactured by bees from the pollen of many flowers. Honey isn't simply a heap of pollen, but it is the extract of innumerable flowers taken into the depths of the body of the bee and alchemized. These many pollens mingled, sublimated, sweetened, and perfected. And that's what knowledge is. Moshe goes on to say that the one who knows doesn't need to argue. And this is so important in a world where very often the loudest voices prevail, those who are most insistent, those who browbeat and badger have their way. But we need not be browbeaten, and just because someone is loud and insistent on a point, it doesn't bespeak truth. In fact, the more abrasive, the more confrontational, the more aggressive the rhetoric, the more likely the person themselves doesn't really believe what they're saying. They're trying so hard because they're really trying to convince themselves. So from this, we understand that argumentation can never conduce to true conviction, true faith. That has to come from another place. That has to come from intuition. And Moshe says that intuition is really the essence of all of our knowledge and the heart of all of our knowledge. And what we truly know comes primarily from this. It isn't something that we obtain externally. And so while we're scrambling to collect facts and synthesize information, all of this only takes us so far. Moshe doesn't discount the ways of intellect altogether. It has its value, but really that value is secondary. The knowledge that intellect produces is ultimately valuable as a vehicle for what essentially comes from spirit. The transmission comes through intuition. This is the fundamental guidance. And then it's given a form, and that form is the form created by our mental faculties. And that form can be a beautiful one. It can hasten and smooth the way for the work of the primary intuition, but it can never take the place of that essential transmission. So there has to be a marriage of the, as Moshe said, of the head and the heart. How do we realize our intuition? Moshe describes 3 steps. One is to actually believe in it, to trust your intuition. Are we ready to do that? Are we ready to say, I'm going to take very seriously something that comes to me not from external sources, not based on any rational process, but something that is welling up from within? Are we ready to make that commitment? And then to follow through on it. Because one might be ready to acknowledge an intuition, but then there are crosswinds, there is competing information, there are obstacles along the way, and it's easy to give in because the inspiration seems so intangible as compared to the distractions and the obstacles. But if you want to develop your intuition, you have to, first of all, believe in it and then really follow through. And you have to be able to distinguish it from other noise. You have to distinguish the signal from the noise. It's like tuning a radio. There are all kinds of competing signals. And so you have to recognize where an impression is coming from. Sometimes the impression comes from our own memories, our own wounds and fears from the past. Another impression might be coming from someone else and impinging on us. We're picking up someone else's strong thought, but we imagine that that's a sacred intuition coming through. It's simply we're being like a sponge and soaking up other people's thoughts and feelings, and it's not our intuition. So one has to learn to see where each impression is coming from. It doesn't mean disrespecting these various impressions, recognizing their source, acknowledging them, but keep tuning in for the central channel, the primary, deepest current that's coming from within. And for that, we need concentration. And Moshe describes the process of concentration as a process of allowing receptivity, but not that receptivity which means just absorbing other people's impressions. It's the receptivity that means going further, going deeper, going down, down, down to the deepest current, waiting, watching in stillness. So it's the Jamali temperament. Now we're often stuck in a Jalali mode of creating, acting, speaking, doing. And the time will come for that, but it's important, first of all, to go into the depths of the Jamal, receive what is being given in the silence, in the stillness, and be with it. Maybe something will come out of it. Maybe nothing needs to be expressed from it. You just keep it in the depths. But we need to avoid the tendency toward busyness of mind that can interrupt the flow of intuition. If immediately, as soon as the intuition starts coming, one is making plans and putting it into categories that are preconceived ones. To really respect the intuition, one has to be able to stay with it in inwardness and let it grow within you, let it deepen within you, let it show you what it wants to show you. And don't immediately assume that you know what it's saying.